Yes, that is the title of our presentation. Just a quick introduction. My name is Marek Muller. I'm an assistant professor of communication studies at Texas State. My co-presenter is Cecilia Cerja, an assistant professor of politics of women's studies at the University of the South. We are not professional wrestling scholars, but we are professional wrestling super fans. So we were so excited at the opportunity to pivot from everything we normally do to give this presentation. We hope that you enjoy. And Cecilia, why don't you kick us off?
Can do. So I know we all remember the epic moment in which Kane told John Cena to embrace the hate, and how John Cena had turned on his best friend. And John Cena in 2012 decided to not embrace the hate and very much stay the face. But now we see in 2025, John Cena has embraced the hate and the fans are still cheering for him, right? And so we thought this was an interesting opportunity to talk about heels and how much praise they get from the audience and Elon Musk as a chicken shit heel. Next slide. So we have a couple propositions in this particular presentation. One, obviously, since the second Trump presidency is new, a lot of the stuff that exists on the KFAB presidency is only contextualized to the first administration. And so we want to say there are actually some very interesting dynamics happening in the second administration in terms of narratives, especially when we think about our favorite special government employee, Elon Musk, right? And so when we think about some of Musk's storylines as a billionaire, as an amazing CEO, as someone who's going to slash the budget by trillions, right? We can see these sort of purposeful and less than purposeful invocations of the heel archetype. And Musk often presents himself as the cool heel, right? Which we'll get into a little bit later. But when we look at what his actions end up exemplifying, it's often that he is the chicken shit heel being saved from someone else. And so later, Merrick will talk about the oppositional reading of Musk's rhetoric as a chicken shit heel and how we can potentially use ethos demolition, just like we do with every other heel, in order to defeat some of the power that Musk has. Next slide. So, when we're situating the Trump administration, right, we have to remember, right, what this presidency is telling us and how it draws from wrestling. And I think one of the clearest ways we can see that is when we talk about Trump's rhetorical appeals, right? He often is using very clear storylines of who is the enemy. So, as our lovely keynote mentioned, right, in his first run on the campaign trail, he largely saw Hillary Clinton as the enemy, right? And but her emails, and we needed to drain the swamp, right? He often has very antagonistic rhetoric against immigrants in the same way. And these are little snippets that his followers, fans, supporters can draw on and keep regurgitating and scream back at him at these various events and rallies that he is hosting, right? And we see that it's like a meta theoretical play because anytime someone fact checks him, right, he pretends that it doesn't exist or goes back to one of those previous storylines, refusing to break, the fourth wall or have any illusion this is nothing but authentic. So the research gap we're trying to fill is using the scholarship from the first administration to apply it to the second administration with a new character and a new storyline, Elon Musk. And so archetypes, right, are sort of the community's collective understanding and symbolism central to the community. So for Trump, right, one of the major ways that they know that they are a part of this and the narrative keeps appearing is when they say that they are part of the MAGA cult, right, or wearing the red hat. And the way that he describes the world is the way that they describe the world, even if we know that that is not actually reality, right? And so it sort of describes the type of actions they should take, the type of political investments that they have, and how they conceptualize the world around him. And he's fundamentally changing the way that they see reality. And so we're going to look into some of that symbolism in terms of Elon Musk.
So as we look into this idea of archetype, largely what Cecilia and I are drawing from is this thing in rhetorical studies called narrative criticism, which suggests that far from narrative simply being something that occurs in fiction, human beings exist largely through the telling of stories, and stories help us understand the way that we exist in the world, what we should expect from the world, how things work in the world according to stories and characters that are repeated over and over and over again. So naturally, it's important, if we do consider this to be a KFAB presidency, to take a look at what potential wrestling archetypes are made manifest in the administration. So obviously, if we were to go back into the most basic of basic wrestling archetypes, we have the two types of characters, the face and the heel, where the face is generally the good guy. We understand the face is not going to use generally dirty tactics. The face is generally going to praise the audience rather than try to drive them away. The face is going to attempt to build solidarity with the people around them and ultimately fight for good and justice. Whereas the heel is very likely to try to antagonize the audience, like very likely to use less than noble tactics, is very likely to just not be the person that you are supposed to want to emulate. If a face goes over the heel, this is good. If a heel goes over the face, this is bad. And we learn life lessons about who should win in any given moment and how we should feel about it based upon their actions. But of course, within any archetype, we can find sub archetypes because there is not just one type of face, there is not just one type of heel. And for the purposes of our presentation, what we are concerned with are very specific sub-archetypical structures of heels. So we have different types that we see. The monster heel, the heel that constantly just rolls over everything in his path. The authority heel, the heel who just has way too much power. The foreign heel, who, oh my goodness, we've seen some pretty unfortunate representations of the foreign heel, as we can see here with the Iron Sheik. And then, of course, the two we really want to talk about today, the cool heel and the chicken shit heel. Now, obviously, given the complexity of narrative structures, you don't just have to be the monster, the foreign, the chicken shit. One could argue, for example, that Rusev or Gunther are currently amalgamations of both the monster and the foreign, or that potentially, well, no, that's probably the best example that I have. But generally speaking, what we are very concerned with are two heel subarchetypes that generally run on the opposite ends of the structure. The cool versus the chicken shit. Because the archetypic structure of the cool heel is sort of the heel that we love hating. The heel that is just really, really cool and is almost so cool that, at least to the smart marks, he becomes a face. He's a villain with swagger, intelligence, dark charm. He breaks the rules, but in a way that's stylish or witty, making them super compelling to watch. Obviously, the example I give in an image is Drew McIntyre and his "I prayed for this and it happened" phase. But we could also take a look at Roman Reigns' ascension as the tribal chief. They are the antagonist, but they blur the line of face and heel. Not quite in the way that a tweener does, but enough that you still cheer them while you boo them. They can steal the focus from the hero, almost make the heel look boring, and shift the narrative weight just through their sheer amazing presence. And yes, they're booed in storyline, but they're often cheered in reality on the message boards, or even at the pay-per-views where the super fans show up. Fans admire them for their performance, for their confidence, their mic skills, for their look. They are fan favorites despite their bad behavior. And oftentimes, the big running joke is, "Why are you booing me? I'm right."
And so we see Elon Musk leaning into this particular archetype, right? And so when we think about him, right, he's a very cool person, right? And there are even rumors that he has his Twitter employees sign an affidavit saying that he is cool. Right? To ensure that everyone knows he's the coolest, right? And we see that like he plays video games. And what other CEO do you know that plays video games? Or, he's dating Grimes, or he's in the Oval Office, right? And so when we see him leaning into this archetype, right, he is defeating the woke mind virus. And we see this in all the ways they sort of have attacked DEI, right? He says the unpopular thing, right, that nobody wants to say. And that's what makes him even cooler. And yes, he may hurt people, but he does have a reason, right? These layoffs have meaning, right? We're going to save trillions. And he's just a misunderstood genius gamer tech bro, that if you don't like him, it's because you don't understand him. Because if you were really in on it, you would sort of see what is happening.
And on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the archetypic structure of the chicken shit heel. You'll see that I have the gif of Dominic Mysterio and Rhea Ripley because for the last few years, the absolute mecca chicken shit has been Dominic Mysterio, the boastful coward who cuts arrogant promos but backs down the second he's confronted. The scheming escapist who avoids combat through things like stalling, feign injury, trickery, or you call in the Judgment Day for some cheating, for some distractions, or for some 4-on-1 action. They hide behind authority figures, or the stronger figures, or in this case, Rhea Ripley, or their factions, the Judgment Day. Stronger allies who really are able to shadow the fact that this chicken shit heel is not actually as tough and unstoppable as he likes to present. But when finally caught in a fair fight and defeated, oh, he is exposed for the absolute chicken shit loser that he is. So the narrative function here is largely premised on this idea of audience catharsis. Because as a boastful coward, there's a dramatic irony. Fans know this heel is not cool, and they want to expose the fraud, which leads to a building of tension and largely contempt. The audience sees through this cowardice that's disguised as strategy, fueling across the storyline a sense of resentment, amplifying a desire for justice and underdog triumph, such that when Dominic Mysterio is finally defeated, the audience erupts in joy as balance is restored because Dominic, or whoever the chicken shit is simply so hated, so chicken shit that even every time he opens his mouth, he is drowned out with booze. So, an oppositional reading, and by oppositional reading, we are not suggesting that we have identified the actual reality, that there is only one true way to understand Elon Musk. What we are suggesting is that at any given moment, as critics, we have an opportunity to provide a critique of power, to provide a critique of who is in charge. And so, in doing so, what we are trying to do is say, well, what if we read Elon Musk as this alternative archetype? What if we took a look at the fact that despite presenting himself as the amazing CEO, the Tony Stark, the self-made man, he was born into privilege amidst one of the most evil institutions in the world, apartheid. What if we looked at him as defended by the authority, much in the same way Seth Rollins was protected by Triple H after turning on the Shield? He's protected through government funding. He's protected by being able to leverage the power of the Trump administration to avoid accountability. What if we took a look at the fact that all too often his mother actually steps in media or social media to defend him when people are mean to him? Or the fact that he literally challenged Mark Zuckerberg to a fight. Zuckerberg agreed, and then Musk sort of let that not happen when he realized it was a bad plan. Current readings of Tesla numbers or Doge stats suggest that he actually fudges numbers and data to look way more successful or competent than he actually is. And he has a tendency to sulk publicly when criticized, as we can see with this very viral tweet that went forward when he was getting a little too much criticism of his life.
And so, what Macaro in critical rhetoric calls us to do is not just to identify these narratives or to identify these power structures, but to move beyond critique about a what do and articulate some of the possibilities that can exist. And so just like with every heel, right? We think in particular this like ethos demolition of Elon Musk that we see happening right now in terms of his Tesla numbers and having to back away from the White House is a pretty clear example of some of the political possibilities we can have to sort of take the power back from this KFAB presidency and the narratives that they are spinning. Next slide.
So if we take this KFAB presidency seriously, and we take the world of KFAB and wrestling politics seriously, what would it mean then if we interpret Musk as a chicken shit heel to quote unquote defeat him? And obviously, defeat here does not mean literally he is pinned 1, 2, 3, but it would mean, what does it mean in the political arena to take someone down? Well, for a chicken shit, Musk's marks need a reason to stop marking out for him. Musk's opposition need that sense of catharsis that comes when the chicken shit is exposed as chicken shit and not cool. Musk needs to be exposed as fraudulent, contra to his self-presentation. In other words, we envision this as ethos demolition, where ethos is a rhetorical term that refers to the credibility, the character of the speaker. And demolition here would refer to the destruction of a rhetor's credibility through specifically the acts of humiliation, of exposure, of fraudulence, through strategic and purposeful goading of the rhetor to act contra to his derived ethos, where derived in this sense means the actual character that the rhetor is attempting to put forward. And there are multiple examples of this that have already happened. But to be clear, this is always going to be an ongoing process. It's impermanent, and it's not always going to be traditionally political. But there was a moment during the height of the election where Musk was exposed as a cheater at video games. And this seems like nothing, but boy, it gave some of his gamer marks a reason to stop marking out. And it was pretty obvious that Musk did not like being accused of being a cheater and actively took steps to try to punish the people who exposed him. Musk's baby mamas have called him out and are still calling him out on social media in a manner that is reshared, remocked, and obviously is not super something you would want as a super powerful government figure to be shared all over social media. But that causes catharsis for those who are really struggling under this current administration. And of course, there's the more traditional political call out, losing the Wisconsin Supreme Court election despite pouring $20 million into it, exposing him to some extent as a fraudulent rich man and politician who is actually not able to influence as much as we might like to think.
And so just to sort of wrap up, we really love the idea of using these narrative archetypes to understand, right, the current iteration of the KFAB presidency and some of the new characters that we're seeing, these new storylines, these new positions, and thinking about how we can use this narrative structure to sort of understand and call out these power structures, and in particular, Elon Musk, right, using ethos demolition as a way to sort of take back the power from the chicken shit heel and prove that he's not a cool heel at all. Thank you all so very much for this lovely presentation or for being here at this lovely conference. And we can't wait to hear what everyone else has to say.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants this presentation, we do have our scholarship cited here.
Yes.